Well, hello and welcome. This is Cheryl Manning, and I'm welcoming you to the TrainingPros Learning Views webinar. Very excited today to be able to talk about an exciting trend within our field, and that is around learning personas. I'm here as the host for today's session. I'll take a few moments just to be able to get us started and introduce Rich and our topic, and very grateful for the partnership with the University of Harrisburg that allows us to do this in a way that really spreads best practices among our colleagues, our clients, our consultants. If you're not familiar with TrainingPros, we are a very specialized learning and development staffing company. We're unique in the market in the way that we work with clients really in three ways. One is really the kind of relationship manager role that I play and my peers play, where we're there to be able to be a partner with you from the learning and development business ourselves, so we understand how to read the tea leaves of the projects that you're working on and how to be the best partner for you and the consultants. We're privileged to have a large pool of consultants, over 15,000 and growing, and we work with you in a unique way in both before, during, and after projects so that we're aligned with your needs, whether it's for muscle or for expertise. And if you want to learn anything more about us, you can certainly come to our website as well. So that's me. I'm someone from the learning and development business myself. I was an Accenture instructional designer at the beginning of my career, spent a lot of time creating learning for IT consultants, went into learning for soft skills for about 20 years after that, and I've been with TrainingPros really for over 6 years at this point, working with clients a lot of times in the Southeast in any kind of capacity that they need our help. And you'll see this is the kind of ways that we often work with clients, whether it's instructional design or some of the special areas like e-learning or graphics, technical communication, and change management. So as I mentioned, today is really an amazing topic. It's about learner personas, and we're unique in that we often rely on the expertise from the University of Harrisburg and their faculty with the Instructional Design Master's Program. Today we have the honor of being able to pull in clients, and which I love, being able to highlight their good work and allow everyone a chance to be able to talk more about this subject, learn from each other, and that's why we have the chat feature, so that this really helps to involve you in the conversation. We're going to be highlighting two individuals today. One is Aubrey Johnson, who is with Toyota North America. He is part of their onboarding practices and a learning and development leader. The work that we're going to be showcasing from Aubrey is about being able to create a One Toyota North America new onboarding experience using learning personas. Aubrey had a cancellation in his schedule today, so he's not able to join us live, but we are going to be featuring his work and his example heavily today, because today is not just about the what and the why of learner personas. It's really about a deep dive on the how-to. And to guide us through that, and with his expertise, is Rich Cordrey, who is a learning and development expert from AutoNation. I've had the opportunity and the privilege to work with Rich over the last couple years. I think you'll find him to be a brilliant and very in tune learning and development leader. He has had a lot of expertise within the learning and development and the design aspects, and we're going to look at really how does this trend really impact the way that we're able to take a page from marketing and be able to use that to be able to really dial in our learning solutions. A big shout out to Rich too, because he just finished his CPLP. So for all those who have been through that process, we know how the hardships from that, and say congrats for that. So with that, I'm going to get us started and present and turn the presentation over to Rich.
All right, thank you so much, Cheryl. Hopefully my sound is coming through okay. We had a few hiccups during our sound check, but I'm on a pretty reliable mic at this point. So thanks again, Cheryl. Like Cheryl said, my name is Rich Cordrey. I am with AutoNation. My co-presenter, we've actually presented a similar presentation with some tweaks over the years. and in person for the most part. Toyota headquarters is having a enterprise-wide event today, and actually all this week, so it came up sort of last minute, and obviously he couldn't get out of that, so he does apologize for that, but we've gone over the presentation, and he's excited to get the example out there and let other people know how they've used learner personas in their own unique process to really drive a very large initiative that they went through over the last couple of years. So I do want to, before getting into that, I do want to thank Cheryl again. Like Cheryl mentioned, we have worked together for the last couple of years. She's really, her and the TrainingPros team overall have really helped AutoNation and myself to build out our learning and development department. We've gone through ebbs and flows, as most of you have, that we went through a nice cycle a couple of years ago of being able to really build up our learning and development internal capacity, and Cheryl has been a wonderful partner in that. She really takes the time to make sure she knows exactly what it is we're looking for, and at this point, honestly, kudos to Cheryl that I really don't have to give too much detail now because she knows what I mean with my quick requests and information sent over to her, and that's because of all that time that we spent together in the first couple of months of the relationship. So definitely want to thank the TrainingPros team for that, and also Harrisburg University. Appreciate them providing this platform and the technical support, and the producer role is fantastic. The entire team there, Justin and Shannon, have been great the entire way through. So want to make sure that everybody gets recognition for that. It's been great. So like Cheryl said, my name is Rich Cordrey. I'm with AutoNation. My current role at AutoNation, I'm the manager leading all of the learning systems and content functions. That's a relatively new role for me. Not that I haven't dealt with learning technologies and systems over the years, but that's a role that we really needed to fill within AutoNation and make sure that we, as we moved forward and modernized and started adding new platforms to deliver content appropriately to our widely dispersed and mobile workforce, that we had somebody build that strategy out. So that's what I'm currently doing within AutoNation. The last 3 years prior to that, I led the learning design and development team, and that is where most of my formal, title experience lies within learning and development. Is on the design and development side, whether managing and leading teams or hands-on development myself. So also Cheryl mentioned, I did just finish my CPLP, a huge weight off my shoulders there, as those of you that have been through it know. I also, on Monday, I'm proud to be able to share that AutoNation will be receiving an award from the ATD Certification Institute for the Enterprise Champion Award, which is for the CPLP certification effort that actually led last year. We have 4 certified CPLPs on our learning and development team now, and we have a few others in process. So very happy to receive that award as well. Aubrey Johnson, like Cheryl said, he couldn't make it. He is an onboarding analyst with Toyota Motors. Their headquarters is now here in the North Texas area. He's been with them several years prior to that move, so he came from California. He specifically focuses in on the onboarding of associates. They have needs ongoing for that, as you would imagine, with a company that size and at their headquarters. So he's done a great job. He's made sure that I'm going to do justice to the content by giving me a lot of good notes. So please feel free to reach out to Aubrey with any questions on their exact process that I might not be able to fill in appropriately, as well as any jazz-related questions you might have, or if you just want to chat with him. He's very big into jazz. So. Moving right along, I want to start with a quick poll. Justin, if we can pull up poll 1, just to get a good sense of everybody's familiarity and comfort level with learner personas. So I'd like to know, have you either researched, even just reading articles about, or used learner personas or attempted to use? So if you could let me know, if not, why haven't you? If it's maybe just a new topic to you, it piqued your interest. Or if you have, what are you hoping to learn during this session today? And I'll go ahead and just look at the responses. We're not broadcasting these. I just want to be able to tailor a few questions, or a few topics to those if possible. So I'm seeing a couple of yeses, are using them briefly. New topic, haven't heard of them before. Learn more about how to integrate them. In the process of researching, so that's good. A lot of this will touch on a lot of the same things. I think the example will be good for those of you who are looking for specific examples. Packaging and presenting. I am providing some resources at the very end and with the presentation that you can use for templating, which I think will be helpful there. Let's see, okay. All right, good. So it looks like we have a decent mix across the board of people that have used them, people that are, it's a brand new topic and you're just going to learn about them initially, people looking for some ideas on how to better integrate them. So it looks like we've got, okay, yeah, so it looks like we really have a range. So I'll make sure to sort of keep the presentation as designed. Which is really intended to cover the range of experience levels. So moving right along then. So today's presentation, we'll just go through the agenda really quickly, as a good presenter should. So what we're going to start with for you new people to learner personas is what is a learner persona. It's a really simple concept, but setting that definition is going to be really important to make sure that we're speaking the same language, all on the same page. Why should I use learner personas? We'll talk a little bit about extending that definition of what is a learner persona and how does that actually help us in our design and development processes. How it differs, for example, from, say, an audience analysis, which is a common question that I get from people. How do I build learner personas? So in this section, we will go through the steps of building a learner persona. So how you should approach the entire process, specific steps you should take, expectations at different points along the process. It's probably the most difficult step for sure. You're defining what those personas should look like, you're gathering data, you're analyzing data, and then you're actually coming up with your final product in the end. What should my learner personas look like? That was one of the comments there about hoping to get out of this today. So I give a very kind of simple, brief showing on the screen of the components that should be included. But as I mentioned, the resources provided at the end will be help you move further past that with some templates that you can use from various professionals in the field. So they can look a number of different ways, but we'll go through the real critical components that should be provided. How do I use my finished learner personas? This is also a difficult part for a couple of reasons. One is obviously instituting any new process into your design and development cycle is always difficult. With something like learner personas, it's you can have an added layer because they're very easily forgotten. So we'll talk about how to actually make them a part of that process and just some really quick and easy strategies that are still very effective to keep those top of mind. And then finally, we'll finish with that example that Aubrey really drove at Toyota Motors of how to create personas in the real world. So one thing that you'll notice and to keep in mind is that you will see several deviations from the process that we'll talk about in the how do I build learner personas because it's real world. There are going to be things that you have to mediate for and change and adjust to. And the Toyota example is a very good example of that. So you'll get a good sense of how to keep the spirit intact while still modifying the approach to fit your specific situation. So I'd like to start with the learner persona discussion and defining learner personas not actually by looking at existing consensus persona definitions from L&D. The reason I do that is because, as Cheryl sort of alluded to, that the idea is not new at all to the business world. Marketing uses versions of personas very consistently. Anything really that's consumer focused and aimed does the same thing. So the definition that I have on the screen here is user-centered design. And user-centered design is a collection of processes which focuses on putting users at the center of product design and development. And I think this really gets to the core of the learner persona idea, that single sentence, the extension of that. So when we look at this, putting users at the center of product design and development is what I like to start with, because some people take this and extend it to, okay, so what we need to do is find out, the entire population and what that population looks like, more of an audience analysis. So we need to separate the difference between user-centered design and human-centered design. So user-centered design, bringing that over to the learning side of the business, what we want to know about is our specific colleagues and our specific learners and the people that we're serving and aiming to effect an improvement in. So we're only interested in that population. We're not interested in the larger population beyond that. So the user-centered design idea hones in on that really well, because when UX and UI designers and product designers are looking at this, they only want to know about the people that use their product. That's what their concern is. So they're going to tailor what they're doing for that. So as we go further into considering the idea of learner personas and building them, we want to keep that same focus in mind, that we're specifically focusing in on our population that's right in front of us, not the larger, wider population. AutoNation is a good example for this, because we have a shift occurring in our frontline sales associate population, and the way that we would approach our audience analysis previously, before the idea of learner personas, would be that, well, we're getting younger, our new associates are in X population, say they're millennials, increasingly larger numbers. So we're going to look at millennial trends, and we're going to look at what those people in the wider population of the U.S. Are trending toward. And that doesn't really work, because we have a smaller subset. We have salespeople that are millennials, and so we have to consider that, and we have to use the data that pushes us in that correct direction. So moving that a little bit further and looking at some of the industry standard definitions of learner personas, you can see the descriptions that we have here. There's a few commonalities in these definitions. So the core that you can pull out of these definitions are that they're well developed. That's important. You don't come to these quickly. They are fictional representations. They are not real people. We don't want to base them on real people individually. That trends in the direction of a profile as opposed to a persona. But most importantly is that third point, which is going to be that they're based on real data and observations. So they are well developed. They're fictional representations that are based on real data and observations. So the one thing we want to make sure that we do is we have the third definition listed there, in-depth descriptions. That's what's very important, is making sure that we create narratives. So we're telling a story about a person. On the other side of the coin, we also want to make sure to keep in mind what learner personas are not, and that is that they are not assumptions or stereotypes. That can be very easy to get to if you have, say, somebody that is really excited about this concept and wants to move forward with it, but the realities of work get in the way, and they just want to get it done as quickly as possible and get something in place to say that they're doing it. that can make it very, very easy to slide into stereotypes. That we don't want to do. So if there's no good data that's being used, if you're not gathering current, accurate data, and then you're not using that to develop these personas, you really can't call them personas. Then we're really just kind of guessing, right? So those are, again, the three key items to keep in mind: well-developed fictional representations that are based on real data and observations is kind of how I would pull together my perfect definition of learner personas. So moving to the next point of why should you use learner personas, and this also gets coupled for me with aren't these just like an audience analysis? So to address that point, an audience analysis for me is not narrative. That's really the defining characteristic for me. If we have an audience analysis, that's going to give us a lot of demographic information. It's going to give us a lot of category-based data. It's going to tell us in general certain buckets maybe that our learners and colleagues fall into, but it stops kind of at that point. We're not taking the extra few steps to really analyze the data, find out if we can see certain trends to create one or more personas and actual representations of people in these groups in order to use them better for the design portion. And there are a couple of really key ways in which I suggest, and others do as well, you use learner personas that make those extra steps really important. So with that discussed, so why should I use learner personas? Number one, great way to learn more about the audience. Like I said, it's taking those extra few steps. So you're doing a lot of the things you would do with audience analysis, and then you're taking a few additional steps there. It just kind of allows you to keep up with these changes and shifts in your employee base, in hiring patterns and recruiting patterns, whether it's based on the population in general or shifts in business direction. So also, it's useful in preventing one-size-fits-all solutions. So not that one-size-fits-all isn't appropriate in some cases. However, if you have programs that really need to be targeted at specific roles, or you have the opportunity to personalize a little bit more and provide multiple formats for different users within the same role, having personas on hand is something that really enables that. So if you have that information and you're keeping your personas in rotation during your design and development cycles, then that information just existing and being present is really going to help to personalize a little bit more, get out of that one-size-fits-all mode for everything. So again, if it's appropriate, it's appropriate. If it's not, learner personas will kind of help you see that a little more directly. They also, for me, and this is my favorite part about learner personas, is they really let you kind of, they remind you of who you're developing for, what the purpose of your content is. We're creating content, we're designing and developing things in order to improve performance and help develop people. So having a representation of an actual person in front of you that's not, an exact copy of an individual person, because that can get a little tricky. But having a representation of an entire class of workers that you're developing this for, it can really help to kind of keep you down to earth in your process. So if we're saying, this is how I would develop things, and this is how I like to learn. That's very easy to slide into without being aware that that's what you're doing. This is a way to look at a user, a prototypical person that's on the other end of this, and think, okay, so that's actually who I'm developing for. Let me keep that in mind. My preference is great, and I have a lot of knowledge and skills to apply to this, but I need to keep that learner in mind ultimately. So since everybody's on the call, I'm assuming that you're at least intrigued, interested. A lot of you indicated that you have already started to use personas, or you've started the research process, you've been using them previously, want to apply them differently. This is going to be a little probably aimed at everybody, depending on whether or not you already have a dedicated process in place. However, people that are still researching or brand new to the concept, this is going to be a very critical part of the process, and we'll go through each one of these steps in much more detail. So, basic steps of building a learner persona. So the way I'd like to preface this step is that this is a time commitment. As I mentioned earlier, if you're going to build personas and you want to use personas, and you want them to be accurate, you want them to really impact your design and development processes in the right way, this is going to be a process that's going to take some time. Now, it's going to take, obviously depends on your organization, size, your access to different subsets of your population, access to existing data, etc. So there are a lot of factors that are going to play in here. This may be pretty quick if you've got a small group that you're developing for, and you need to create, a few quick personas for one single project. It may be a little bit faster. With AutoNation, to use my example again, we are in 16 different states and have around 300 locations, 26,000 employees in total. In order to get a representative sample out of that, that's something that took us some time, even for one single role. So getting one role adequately documented and gathered and agreed upon and sent surveys out and did interviews, all those things. It took quite a bit of time for a single role, but that's the nature of our business and how we're situated and how we're spread out across the country. So that'll be something to keep in mind. So the steps that we've got here, the first step that we're going to want to go through is group definition. So once we've decided that personas are something that we want to pursue, we obviously have to think about setting some boundaries initially. I will say quickly here with group definition, this is going to be a process that I would expect, just like in the ADDIE model with evaluation, you're going to loop this back in pretty much everywhere because you want to be validating this the entire time. Data gathering will be your next step. So once you've come up with a loose set of terms around this is the group or groups that we want to create personas from and start gathering data for, then we actually have to go about gathering that data. So we'll talk about a few of the fairly standard ways that you can gather the data. Some of it will be easily accessible, some of it will be brand new. Once we have that data all pulled together, then obviously we've got to analyze it and see if we can find some trends. And that's what's going to really validate those groups. And that's where we're going to learn whether or not we need to adjust the groups because we made assumptions that didn't bear out. Then we get to the fun / hard work of persona creation and then updating. So we create the personas. It's important to realize that we don't stop at that point. Once we create them, we get them into rotation, we start using them. We do want to make sure to revisit them on a regular basis, make sure that they're up to date. Again, AutoNation, we're going through several shifts in certain employee populations that we have to keep in mind and make sure that we are responding to as we design and develop going forward. So the personas that, say we created personas 5 years ago, some of those personas would already be out of date. So, we want to keep those top of mind and keep that data updated. So group definition. So I started to mention this earlier. There are a few things with group definition that we want to keep in mind. The first, we do want to start at a very high level. We want to say, hey, do we have a program that we're designing for that we can give personas a test run with? Well, then let's go ahead and start there. And what roles do we have within that population that's going to be affected by that program? Let's just keep it at that high level. What we don't want to do is start digging too deep to the point where we're setting an expected persona before we've even got to the data. So once we start at that high level, we may want to refine just a little bit. So with sales associates, if we say, we're going to do sales associates at AutoNation, we're going to create a set of personas because we know that we have some variation within those. So do we want to create specific personas for new to the auto industry and new to sales? Do we want to set some for mid-career? Do we want to set some for senior level sales associates? Do we want to create layers on the front end so that our data doesn't get skewed when we start the analysis process? Because obviously the center point, the average associate is going to look very different if we lump them all into the same group and we don't create some basic boundaries around them. But we only want to go so far as to create those basic boundaries. We don't want to, again, make assumptions on what their motivations are, for example. We want to just start with really the things that are we can observe and that are quantifiable. So once we finalize those, we just want to stay flexible. So you're going to create those groups. You're going to do your refinements. Say, okay, so here's where we're going to start. We're going to start gathering data. We're going to analyze the data, but we have to know that there are going to be some tweaks that we'll want to make there. I would say one thing you'll want to do at this point, just so as not to cause yourself a lot of rework, would be emphasize the use of your stakeholders. If you have real key stakeholders that are going to be impacted by these programs, the same stakeholders that you would be working with on your actual program development, loop them in. We want to make sure that you own the persona process because you are using it for design and development. However, if we've got these primary stakeholders that really are setting the expectations for the roles, it's great to have their input as early and as often as possible. So I would keep that in mind as a secondary consideration. So when we're gathering data, I don't think any of this is probably going to be very new to anybody, but there are a few categories of data that really just work well for persona gathering. So I'll start with, and I actually put it last here on methods, but extant data. So if you have existing data that is just sitting there, that's where I personally would start. That's going to help you define your groups a little bit more closely. Those are going to be things that you just have in your HRIS systems. Those are going to be ages, depending on your organization. You might have educational levels. You're going to have tenure in the company, in the role, whatever, all those different data points that HR is keeping. Those are things that you can start with. And that might help you define those roles a little bit better and define the persona groups that you want to aim at. So I would actually start with that because that can provide a lot of clarity as you move forward. So past that, again, this depends on your organization, on kind of the communication standards. It also depends on convenience. How easy is it for you to actually perform some of these data gathering exercises. In my personal opinion, interviews and focus groups are great for this if you have smaller, more targeted populations that you're creating personas for, and if you have access to them in a very non-intrusive way. If you can quickly get groups together for focus groups or do individual interviews with key performers, for example, then those are great to use. You're going to get a depth of information that you won't get on surveys, which are a great tool, and that's honestly been our primary tool at AutoNation for gathering this sort of data. So keep that in mind. Interviews and focus groups are fantastic. If you can get them, the data analysis piece, which comes next, is actually a little bit more in-depth if you do interviews and focus groups, because you get into textual analysis and making determinations based on that data. So there are going to be drawbacks, benefits to both. You can see the variables listed there. This is just a small sampling of variables. We actually are going to provide, and Justin might be able to type down there and let everybody know if they can see it, sample questions document. So that actually comes, I've provided a few examples from a TD at work publication from a few years ago that learner personas were featured in. They weren't the highlight of it, but that'll give you some other questions that you can get some variables from. So these are just some examples that you may want to aim at. But I will highlight a few of them: motivations, expectations, challenges, pain points, goals. Those are all really critical things to gather when you're getting a persona, because again, we're going past that audience analysis. We need to be able to build a narrative about this this group, this learner group that we're wanting to represent. So you've got to go further and be able to tell a story. And it's not going to be much of a story with age, gender, education, and tenure, unfortunately. So that's data gathering. Data analysis, this is really the hard part for most people. I will throw in here that my academic background, I have a bachelor's and master's in sociology, and I teach sociology online on occasion for some local schools. The data analysis is something that I've been involved with for a long time. It's still the hard part for me. I'm much more a qualitative guy, as it turns out. So, but the data is critical. You have to find a way to properly analyze it, to properly apply it, to create your personas. So you're looking for trends in the data. That's really all you're looking for. Again, the survey data makes this a little bit easier because you can create categories. And then obviously the other things like tenure, education level, you can do years of education, for example. Those sorts of things are going to be very easy. You just use measures of central tendency, find the averages, find the medians. Those are pretty easy to aim at. Your motivations, your goals, preferred learning methods, things like that, those are going to be the ones that are tricky, and you really want to spend some time with survey design and interview design in order to overcome that difficulty, because a lot of people at this point do get frustrated and it's hard to proceed. Plan for it, be aware of it, know that this part is going to be probably harder than the gathering itself, depending on what kind of information you're trying to get together. So just be aware of that and be prepared for it. But again, you're just looking for patterns and trends. You're looking for, okay, so we've got this role defined, we've got this persona that we're building. If we're looking at this data, who is this data showing us? And that's really how you have to look at it. The data is going to tell you who your persona is. You don't want to start with that expectation. You want to get rid of that assumption and go where the data leads you. So creation. So this is where that separation from the audience analysis really becomes real. This is where you're putting the face to the data, and you're putting the story to the data. And again, going back to what I just said, really drawing it out of the data is what you'll be doing. So there are three key items that I whittle the idea of persona creation down to once you've done all of that other work. And this seems rather simple, I guess, at this point, but your persona has to have a name. You have to be able to refer to whatever persona is active at the current time by a name. They need a face. You need to be able to picture this person. That's part of the humanizing of the process. You are creating empathy for your end user, for your learner, for one of your colleagues, saying, okay, this person has a name, I know what they look like. Whenever we're in our design and development meetings and processes, we've got that in mind, we know who we're aiming at. And then to extend on that, you have to have the narrative. Again, you want to be able to tell a story about this person. And for some people, you'll look at some of the examples in some of the resources that I've provided, that you may look at them and say, well, that's a lot of information. And why do we need to know, say, the gender? Why do we need to know all of these other things that are a little taboo maybe when you're going through a hiring process? But at this point, in the relationship, it's really not. I mean, you have to have those things in order to create a person that you're really bringing onto your team. So these three components are the critical components. You got to have a name, have to have a face, and there has to be a story behind it. So once you've got it built, you've got them in rotation, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, updating those personas. So you want to keep these updated. Like I said, I would put it actually on a schedule to say, hey, maybe we're not going to do this large scale survey or interviews or focus groups, on an annual basis even. Again, this depends on your organization size and how easy that would be to do. But we do need to put it on the calendar for, say, every other year, or if there's a new initiative that new roles are created for, a new department, or there's just shifts in business that, say, the recruiting and the talent acquisition and talent development groups, maybe they're changing their strategy. So we want to stay in tune with that and know that, hey, if they're changing something, maybe we need to have a discussion about how they're approaching recruiting now. Because if they're hiring people with different attributes and different personality traits and different motivations, then we need to respond to that at the same time. So let's put it on the calendar, whether it's maybe a biannual meeting that you're already having, or you just put it on the agenda to say, hey, let's just talk about this if it's not the right time, or if we're in a good spot and we know that nothing has changed. Let's just make sure to bring it up and discuss it just in case. So again, I would keep it on the schedule. I wouldn't update them and go through that process for no reason, but if you need to, it needs to be part of the process of using them. So at the end of that process, so we've gone through the definition, we've gathered the data, we've analyzed the data, we've built our actual personas, we're updating them on a constant basis. So what should that persona actually look like? And I provided sort of a range of pictures here to show, they're going to look like whatever the data says they should look like. So they could be any range of, age, gender, tenure in the company, educational level, interests, etc. So letting the data pull that out is what's really key, because the way that I kind of discuss it is, you don't want to start out saying, well, I used to work in this role, and there's a 47-year-old guy over there named Bob, married with 3 kids. I think that's the average employee in that group. Because, you'll try to find that person in the data, and you'll start to justify that decision. And having that personal experience is great, but that really should help you with the definition of the group, as opposed to saying, well, this I think is what the persona should be. That's going to be one of them. Say we're even going to create 3. If we're already leaning towards something at the beginning. So that's why it's really important, until you've gone through that entire process with all of those steps. The name, the face, the narrative, none of those exist until after you've analyzed the data and you've really drawn out who that person is and what that persona should look like. So here's I want to stress this is a very simple version, and this might even be a quick persona version that somebody has like sitting right on their desk or pinned up in their cube or on their office wall. But this is a very simple version of the sort of information that you should have and the data that should be present within it. So one thing I will say is a few of the resources that I provided, they do have templates. The templates are great. So make sure to keep those in mind. Go out there and find them, use them, create your own, modify it for your purposes. But in the end, this is really the goal. This is what you're looking for. So you want to have that picture. You want to have the name. So we've got Jennifer here. What I like to do is create a few key categories that we want to keep in mind and highlight those in some way on the persona itself. Whether it's going to be one full page or, again, if you just have kind of an abridged version, then you can kind of highlight those categories at the top. So we have Jennifer. She's a sales associate. She's 28 years old. She's got a 2-year degree, and she's been with the company for 8 months. And then we tell a story about Jennifer. So the categories up top, I've seen this before, where that sort of everything gets whittled down to that. Again, we're almost going toward an audience analysis in that case, maybe with a little bit more detail and flavor, but if we stop at the categories, that's what we've got. So you can see we've got a story below. She's new to AutoNation, new to automotive retail, doesn't know what she wants to do necessarily in the future. She's only been with the company a few months, but she's very interested, driven. She's an autodidact. She, self-learns. She goes in, seeks out information from her colleagues, and she likes to use her phone for learning and for getting information that she's looking for. So, we want to tell that story. Now, the actual persona in this case would be quite a bit longer. I didn't want to fill the page with too much text. But you would have information, about her motivations, about past jobs potentially, about goals, about pain points in her current role. What is she doing to try to move to the next level? What does she see as her roadblocks? Who does she see as a mentor or those people that are going to support her as she moves forward? So making sure that all of those components are together in whatever way you decide to template it. I would make it kind of, create a template so that it's consistent, but in whatever way it looks, it does need to be visual, needs to be clearly laid out, and it needs to be, somewhere that you can actually, in a format that you can actually distribute in some way. So, and that does lead us into, how do I use these? So the critical part to keep in mind is that, what we're doing is we're creating these personas not to create them, sit them in a drawer, maybe we introduce them to people once in a while as they're working on projects, but really to have these personas as part of the design team as you're going through any project that's relevant for the personas. So in a perfect world, you would have personas for everybody. Every role possible, might have one. In reality, and this is, the way that we work, you have personas for key roles. You've got personas for roles that are regularly the target of programs that are being developed and or critical roles as well. So that's obviously something that you have to decide for yourself, what the extent of those is going to be. But the ones that you do use and the ones that you've decided are critical and the ones that are going to be used often, you want to do a few things to make sure that they're actually in rotation and they're actually having the impact that you want them to. So making them visible is one. I mean, that's very simple. You just want to put them somewhere that people can see them. So if you have a common area, if your team's all located in the same area of your building, then you just print them out, put them on the bulletin board, wherever it may be, have them visible, especially where people are doing design work. So if you've got a conference room or a workspace that is always, kind of central in that design process, put them there. Have a few copies. Myself and my team, we work remotely. So, if you've got remote workers, just make sure that they have a copy of them. Make sure that they have them on hand and that they're available. Next, you really, and the next two go together, you want to make them part of the team. As you're having your design meetings and you're questioning, you're brainstorming, you're coming up with directions, you want to actually ask what this person would think. Obviously, they're not there to answer, but if you've created a really robust profile or persona, then you should be able to collectively agree on, well, what would Jennifer think? Let's step back and see, this is what I think, but let's really look at this from Jennifer's perspective. And for me, that really helps keep the right focus. This goes back to the idea of humanizing, creating empathy, is that, Jennifer is who you're designing this for primarily. It's not you, it's not your stakeholders, even though that may be a tricky conversation. I'll let you decide how to handle that one. But Jennifer is the target. That's who the entire effort is for. So that's where the tiebreaker comes in. If Jennifer seems like she wouldn't like this idea, and everybody can agree that we think that it might work, but I don't think Jennifer's gonna buy it. It's probably time to come up with some new ideas, right? So those are really critical. Keeping them visible, making them as human as possible is really key to making sure that they stay in rotation and they stay used. So we're going to go through the Toyota example now that we've gone through the process. So Toyota, they had the need was that they were moving their headquarters from Southern California to North Texas. And with that, they were going to combine a few locations into one. They had to come up with a plan to address that. They obviously knew they were going to have some onboarding to do, a lot of things to square away with existing employees and new employees, and bringing them all into one location. So let's look at how they handled that. So you can see on the map here, they were moving several locations around. So the new North American headquarters is located in the Plano, Texas area, North Texas. They were moving their entire Toyota Motors and financial services from Southern California, as well as some other employees in the Kentucky and New York areas. So they were all coming into this new campus. The Lexus headquarters was moved there as well, and financial services, which are all separate companies, but they're on this very large campus in North Texas. So bringing all those people in, they knew they weren't going to bring everybody, so now they had this large effort of how to get people into this new facility, get them up to speed, keep their production up, as well as welcome new people in. So just to give you, I don't have the exact numbers, but percentage-wise, they actually offered almost 100% of employees in all of these locations the opportunity to relocate to the North Texas facility, which is rare in itself. However, those of you that might have been through something like this can appreciate this number. They had upwards of 70% of their employees accept relocation and move to North Texas with them, which is very impressive. So, but that still left, obviously, a large gap of between 20 and 30% of people that were going to be new employees to Toyota. So, as they pulled this effort together, the onboarding team and the learning and development teams, they had a challenge of, we have this large, massive relocation effort. We've got multiple organizations coming into this headquarters. And so their program is called One Toyota, and it's a very employee-centered program. They want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, everybody has the right mindset and the same goal moving forward. But they've got all the logistic things that they have to handle within that process too. So how do we create an onboarding program and deliver it in the right way that's going to address the needs of everybody and keep performance at maximal level, so we don't want to waste anybody's time. So the initial layout that they created for their onboarding agenda, very simple, kind of high level. They've got their welcome to Toyota. They've got a company culture and history. They've got a campus tour for the new building, benefits and payroll to get everybody on board there, getting a Texas license and registration, and getting their toll tags from our toll authority here. So you can see that, knowing that we've got some different populations, this onboarding agenda by itself isn't probably the maximal way to do things for everybody. So they needed to find a way to individualize the process, and that's when they started moving in the direction of learner personas. So they broke down the base personas. They did that initial group definition. They've got people that are relocating that are existing employees. They've got people that are relocating and are new employees. They've got local new hires, people that live in North Texas but are new to Toyota. And then they also converted a number of business partners that were working with Toyota for outside companies doing certain things with Toyota but weren't part of Toyota. So they had a lot of Toyota-specific content that they needed. So they went through a process of defining these and realizing that they really had to address all these people in very specific ways. So what they did was they created some best practices during this process. And here, actually, let me go back to this one. So thinking about the previous slide with the onboarding agenda, you can see the people that are relocating to the area. It's very important for them to have good information on the new campus, because nobody's seen that. That was new for everybody. But they also had getting a driver's license, getting situated in the area, getting toll tags, because their new facility is right on a toll road, so it's pretty much a requirement for everybody. So you've got all those things that was very critical to those people that for local new hires, they already have a Texas driver's license. They probably already have a toll tag if you live here. So there are these certain things that, very critical for some people, not so much for others. Those existing employees, they really didn't need to go through Toyota company history. They've already done that, that they've been living that for their time with the company. And then the partner conversions, they had a whole different situation. So finding out how to break those down, that's really where the application of those personas went. They had those 4 personas. Now, one thing you will notice with theirs is that we don't have the actual narratives and pictures and names, because that was sort of a later on effort that occurred in their case. And again, this is that real world example of kind of how they went through it and how it organically came up. So the process that they went through and that they refined during this was, number one, they've got to do the review of the personas. That was bringing those stakeholders in, making sure that they were on board with these 4 different groups of people that they defined and decided that they wanted to move forward with. Then they reviewed the content. Does our content match, or how do we adjust it so that it does match? How do we create proper agendas and schedules to get new associates to Toyota that are starting on the same day as existing employees? How do we move them through parallel tracks of onboarding, bringing them together at the right times and separating them at the right times? Then they went through a process of verification, meeting with their stakeholders, verifying that everything was accurate and comprehensive. Then they went back, filled the gaps. They got stakeholder feedback, figured out what content they were missing or what content maybe they could bridge to make it as streamlined as possible for all parties. They did alignment sessions. Once they filled in all the gaps, got all of the stakeholder feedback integrated, and then, I apologize, and then finalizing the content for their final presentation. So a lot of this was existing content, which is important to remember in this process. They created these personas, and then they had to go back and kind of make some adjustments based on the new information that they had gathered. So again, real world example of how they started with a big initiative to bring all of these different populations together, and then had to pull back a bit to make sure that they were personalizing as much as possible. They've kept these personas in place for several years now. They still use them today in their onboarding processes, and so it's been something that Aubrey has really driven and loves, and it's been great for them. So I had to go a little bit quickly through the end part of that there, but I would like to throw up the poll for the end, just to share with everybody. This is a public poll. Do you have any ideas based on the strategies that we went through specifically that you may be able to further integrate into your design process? If yes, if you could share some examples of specific things you might start with from the discussion, so that other attendees on the call might be able to take some notes and benefit from that as well. Yeah, good examples. Find out what extant data is actually out there, making these personas public and visible. That's really critical. Starting with one project, that's a great idea. Starting with one project is always good to make sure that you've got a controlled environment to use these in. It makes it a lot easier of an undertaking for sure. Yeah, what do they currently know? What do they need to learn? That's absolutely data that you would gather during the process for sure. Focus group, interview, and survey questions. Again, the sample questions document that's over there will kind of give you a head start on that. And at the end of the presentation as well, which I believe the team will share, I have a slide with a number of different resources that you can fill out that sort of information. give you some more examples, some templates, some questions that you could and should be asking. All right, that looks like probably all the answers that'll come in on the poll. I do have one more slide, and this is just fun for me because Aubrey and I have used this in live presentations. So again, I just want everybody to keep in mind, while you're building these, while you're going about them. First, I'm fully willing to discuss this further with anybody that wants to find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message. But this slide right here is sort of something I like to use to combat assumptions during live presentation. I like to ask people what they think this says, and without fail, the only thing that you can come up with would be "good times are here again." But if we pull back and see the full picture, that's actually what we see. So just make sure that assumptions don't leak into the process, and just stay aware of the process, and that you need to use data, and that's really what's going to result in great personas. So thanks everyone for attending. I'm going to throw it back over to Cheryl and Justin and the team. They've got some additional information for you, and I've really enjoyed it and hope to speak with some of you in the future.
Thank you so much, Rich. That was a great presentation. I know that Shannon and I are kind of nodding in agreement here. There's a lot of things that you mentioned that we can use here to move from more of a learner profile to a learner persona. So that's been great. Very quickly here, just want to thank Rich, thank Cheryl, thank TrainingPros. Just a little more information on our Learning Technologies Master of Science. Professional education, we offer a lot of summits and other opportunities for professionals. And if anyone's interested in cybersecurity, somewhat relevant topic here, you can click on the link here on this slide and leave that up, or if you know anybody, you can pass that along. At this point, I'm going to thank you for joining, and I'm going to change the layout to a feedback layout. If you have a few minutes, please give us some feedback on the presentation and the webinar today. We take the feedback seriously, and we appreciate your time providing that. And other than that, thank you very much. Enjoy your Wednesday, and we will see you on the next webinar. Have a good one.